All right, everyone. This is me, Lauren Cadillac.
Me, Jamesha Lambert.
And we are back with more Kyle Rittenhouse commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So I had gone home on Wednesday and I watched everything that had happened on Monday.
Right.
And you haven't seen Monday yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to watch Monday together. Well, parts of it at least. Yeah. Okay. So over here, they haven't started any hearings or anything. They're just doing some housekeeping, which is what we call it when we go through pretrial stuff, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here we go.
All right, let's go.
I hear the judge forgets to call the jury.
Oh, yeah, I suppose I should do that.
Yeah. Oh, oops, got called. Okay.
It's Monday.
It was Monday. And apparently there's some kind of football game or something. Okay, so here is our witness. Here we go.
Those necessary to finish up the EMT basic program?
Correct.
And was there anything else you needed to do to finish up that program?
Apart from submitting an application to be licensed through the state, that's essentially it.
Okay, so this guy's an
Are you familiar
EMT,
with the requirements in order to become an EMT in Wisconsin?
I am.
What are those requirements?
So the prosecutor's
So
asking
just to
him how
recap,
become an EMT.
finishing
Because
some
part
sort of
the
college
whole thing
coursework, whether it's an
yesterday
EMT basic,
was
or if you
2
go
days
on
later
for an
on
advanced
this
EMT
was
or
that
an EMT
Kyle
paramedic.
Rittenhouse,
So
like,
the
wanted to get
coursework
ready.
through the accredited
they're
college
showing,
is the first
really?
thing. And then following that is the, like I said, the 2 national registry of EMT or emergency medical technicians exams that you take. Once you complete those and pass them, then you submit an application to whatever jurisdiction that you'll be working in. Because while you might learn, you know, this much, you're only able to potentially do this much given local protocols and laws.
Did you complete all of that yourself?
I did.
Did you obtain a certification from the state of Wisconsin to be an EMT?
I did.
And did you put that into practice?
I did.
How so?
Like I mentioned before, I worked for a private ambulance in Milwaukee for a number of years.
Turns and looks at the jury.
Did you continue on in the field to get more advanced training or more advanced certification after that?
I did.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So when I was working as an EMT basic, I decided that I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to advance my knowledge, my expertise, my experiences, and I went back to school to Waukesha County Technical College, and this is where I took the EMT Paramedic Course.
Waukesha County.
Can you tell us about that course?
Yeah. Yes. The EMT Paramedic Course, I guess a quantitative way to differentiate the two. EMT Basic is about 180 hours of class time, and EMT Paramedic is about 1,600. So for the specific course that I took at Waukesha County Technical College, I took 34 credits in a semester. The way that this course was structured is you would take a morning class, and an afternoon class. And this would go on for the entire semester. These classes would be, for example, one of the first 2 courses that I took was one course specific in treating trauma, and then medical emergencies. So there's a difference between those 2. So morning class, afternoon class, and then at the end of 2 weeks, in this kind of condensed, really fast-paced, really hard-hitting courses, you then take the exam for those. And then as long as you passed with a B or higher, you were then essentially able to move on to the next segment. So if at any point in this program you were to fail a course, say you failed your morning class halfway through, but you passed your afternoon class, you would have to wait for the next academic semester to go back, to reattempt.
Did you hear
Were
that?
you able to make...
Okay, so whatever the course thing that he just talked about, that 1,600 hour thing, he said that they do it in 2 weeks, and you have morning classes and then afternoon classes are 2 different topics, and then you take one of the tests at the end of the 2 weeks, and if you get a B or above, you can take the second test, but if you don't, you have to wait for the next semester, redo the class, and retest.
I mean, hey, you in the back of an ambulance with me, you are my first line of defense.
Oh, sure.
So
But think about, you're going to hear this guy testify that he passed on the first try.
Good.
And to me, the significance of this testimony
Mhm.
is that Kyle Rittenhouse will come to testify
Mhm.
that
And
he
you'll
was in
see-
like firefighter and training and. But this guy actually did it, and he passed those rigorous exams
Mhm.
on that day. So,
Mhm.
I mean, to me, that's a stark contrast.
Yeah.
And this is what
Make it through that entire program?
I was.
Is that true for everybody else in your class?
And you
It
heard
is
someone
not.
who actually did.
What was the kind of the dropout rate, if you will?
From what I remember, we had about 25 to 30 students. I was one of maybe 10 that passed.
Bet.
Once you finished all of that coursework, did you get any new license or
Well, he was
certification?
testing while I was
I did.
watching this.
And what was that called?
That is the Emt Paramedic certification.
Is that from the state of Wisconsin?
He seems like
It
a
is.
good kid.
Do you remember approximately when you obtained that?
That would have been 2014, I want to say.
Can you help us understand the difference between an EMT and a paramedic?
Yes, I can. Like I said, a quantitative way to delineate the two is the amount of coursework. A simpler way that I like to put it to people is paramedics can put new holes in people. So some of the, sorry, would you like to
Go ahead.
Some of the things, for example, are administering IV medications, so knowing how to start an IV. Also, cardiocentesis, which is essentially a life-saving maneuver which involves extracting fluid from the heart. There's also a great deal of pharmacology knowledge that needs to be known. For example, EMT basics can administer 6 different kinds of medications. Paramedics, and again, it depends on the jurisdiction that you're working in, but nationally, you're taught a little over 50 different kinds of medications. And that's not just names, but it's indications, contraindications, or when to use it, when to not use it, dosages, which can be dependent on weight, age, and then there's also just
Like,
the general
essentially trust
knowledge
paramedics
that's
and
known.
EMTs
So while
so
there
much
are
more now,
a lot more
like,
technical
oh,
skills that you learn in
they're basically
pharmacology
like
and things
mini
like that,
doctors.
it's also being able to identify and properly assess.
After you obtained your certification as a paramedic, did you work in that field?
I did.
Can you tell us about that?
Like I said, I've been previously employed on a private ambulance as an EMT basic. I then continued to work on a private ambulance as an EMT paramedic.
Did you ever do any of that work here in Kenosha?
In Kenosha, no, but in Racine, I worked for Erickson Ambulance for a time.
Racine must be nearby.
During your time working as a paramedic with that private ambulance company, what sort of
I don't know. I haven't figured
medical
that out.
emergencies did you have to
You
respond
should
to?
are pointing.
So Erickson
Yeah, the
Ambulance
people in the
does
audience have something around their neck.
primarily, I think almost exclusively what's called inter-facility transports. So it's not like when somebody calls 911, Erickson Ambulance is the one to respond. Versus like in Milwaukee, there's essentially these calls are shared with the fire department.
Okay, just personal. When I had my car accident, I was in the ICU for 4 days, and then I was 2 weeks on the ortho floor, and then they moved me to like a rehab hospital is what it's called. It's not like drug rehab, it's like physical rehab.
Physical
Well,
therapy
I was like, rehab? I ain't got no rehab. Anyhow, so one of these kind of ambulances took me.
A private.
Yeah. So like they put me on a bed and they ambulanced me there and they gave me medication and stuff so it didn't hurt too bad. But it was like it's like getting an Uber between hospitals practically.
Yeah.
You know. So he could do life-saving work, but that's not really what he was doing.
Yeah.
It's just-
And private ambulances,
Important
so
work.
private ambulances
Yes.
kind of back
I
up the
think like when you
firefighters.
have events,
But specifically for Erickson Ambulance in Racine, when I worked as an EMT
Yeah,
paramedic,
of course. Yeah.
versus the ones that come
our
out of
general
hospital.
patient population were elderly people. So this was, I mean, a range of emergencies, anywhere from diabetic issues to potentially mental health issues. There's always the chance or the chance of trauma. Say somebody falls. Cardiac issues are also a big, well, a more I guess, ubiquitous thing with the geriatric. Cardiovascular emergencies are a lot more common given the age of geriatric patients.
Well, duh.
Do you remember approximately how long you worked as a
13-year-olds are
paramedic?
having heart attacks. We'd have to really...
I'd say about a year.
Were there ever times in which you had to deal with someone suffering from a gunshot wound?
Yes, I have.
What was that like?
It's difficult. Gunshots can be very traumatic, and I mean traumatic in the sense of the physiology of what it can do to the body. Obviously, there are numerous factors that go into it: the size of the caliber, where the person's shot, how many times, and when you are practicing in school, it is much different from when you actually go and put your hands on somebody who is bleeding. There's lots of blood, screaming. Generally speaking, there's somebody there that's frantic. So then not only are you having to focus on the patient, but you have to deal with the surrounding situation, which can be potentially, like I said, a frantic family member, say if it's an accident or self-inflicted. But also it can be a dangerous situation to go into because, generally speaking, I mean, you shoot people to hurt them, and there's always that potential of continued on-scene violence.
We ain't watching that.
No.
So it can be
Thank goodness.
very hectic.
Hectic.
It definitely doesn't get easier the more you do it. Maybe going through the motions, going through your mental checklist of things that you need to do. But it definitely doesn't get easier watching that, hearing that.
That's how I feel about the practice of law. Like I know how to prepare better.
Since
and
you
all those
obtained
kind
your
of things, but it's
paramedic
still, like,
certification from the state of Wisconsin, have you
Every day is
continued your
different.
education in that field?
Semi-traumatic.
I have.
It's like the
Can you tell us about that?
Right, yes.
I
It's like you know,
went to school
until you're like,
for outdoor
do
education,
I know? Do I know?
and naturally through that field,
If I was this
you
kid's
are
mom,
finding yourself in remote areas where there is going to be some form of delayed
yeah,
care,
the way you
meaning,
talk,
meaning
yes.
that you aren't able to get to a hospital
I'd be like, you did our
within an
business
hour.
right.
And that's commonly referred to as the golden hour, specifically with trauma patients. I then took a wildland firefighter course, which I did complete. And then I also took what's called Wilderness First Responder, which is the pretty, it's essentially the industry standard for people who work in the outdoor industry.
Have you worked in the outdoor industry, as you say?
I have.
What kind of work have you done?
So these things.
My first job in the outdoor industry was working as a sea kayak guide in the Apostle Islands.
A sea
Oh, so
kayak
he's a sea
guide
kayak
in the
guide.
Apostle Islands?
Listen
Is that
to
right?
this.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
And then from there, naturally through schooling and opportunities, I primarily worked with children, middle school age, and also from there I was or am an American Canoe Association sea kayaking instructor, so I actually teach people how to effectively sea kayak. Bit of context, specifically for where I worked in the Apostle Islands, Lake Superior is very cold, can get very windy, which means very wavy, so it's maybe just a little bit more intense than maybe paddling around your lake cabin. Yeah.
Are you continuing your studies today?
I am.
And how close are you to finishing those up?
I have one more class that I need to complete to receive my bachelor's in outdoor education.
Just get it done. It's our class.
I want to turn your attention, Mr. Grosskreutz, to the summer of the year 2020.
Okay, here we get into the summer.
And we're going to lead up to
Here's the
August
thing to
25th.
fill the
But
audience
before
with.
that, did you spend time that summer attending any protests or demonstrations?
I did.
Can you tell us about that?
After the death of George Floyd, I found myself demonstrating in Milwaukee. This was, I want to say, maybe 2 days.
I'm just gonna pause this. I definitely wanted to go demonstrate, but TJ, the computer lady, was like, "We need you in the office, Lauren."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay." She said, "You serve us better
in
in your
in
desk."
your seat.
Yeah. Then you do.
So when
on
we
the
need
streets.
you, you're there versus.
And then
Days
seeing
after
what
George
happened
Floyd's
here,
death.
I'm glad.
And I was out with a friend of mine who I actually took EMT Basic with, and we were out demonstrating. We were seeing what the scene was like. Seeing what the scene was like. We didn't make signs or anything like that, but like I said, we found ourselves down in Milwaukee.
And when you say you were demonstrating, what exactly were you doing?
Well, I think what I was specifically doing was just being in attendance.
But I want to make sure we understand what you mean by demonstrating. Were there people damaging property?
No.
Lighting fires?
No.
Was there any violent clash with police?
No.
What time of day, if you recall, were these demonstrations?
That specific first one, generally late morning into late afternoon.
So what would other folks be doing at these demonstrations?
People would be holding signs. They would be chanting various things, driving cars down the street.
And you said you initially were there just kind of to see the scene?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
And tell us what happened after that.
So after walking for a few hours, kind of starting to wrap the day up, and all of a sudden somebody starts yelling, "Medic, medic." And I'm walking, like I said, with my friend who I took EMT Basic with, and he looks at me and he says, "That's you." I was like, "Oh,
So
I guess you're right."
basically, him and his friend
and
realized
then
that there's no medics or EMTs around at all.
Mhm.
And so they start going out every night and providing free services to protesters.
Mhm.
So he has on a camera. Let's see if we can get. Okay. So, excuse me. This is a picture that was in a newspaper. This is the guy who's testifying. So he walked around, and I think this is his friend. He walked around wearing this blue paramedic hat. He said he tried to stay neutral.
Objection. Proceed.
While you were out there on the night of August 25th, were you also taking your own video recording of what was going on?
I was.
Can you tell us about that, please?
I can. So essentially, when there wasn't a medical emergency or somebody seeking assistance, I am a ACLU legal observer, and I decided that the next best thing that I could do that night was just simply record.
Was this something where you were just recording it onto your own equipment, or was it being shared in any way?
It was being recorded from my cell phone, but it was through a Facebook live stream.
Were you broadcasting live on Facebook while you were doing that?
I was.
For hours.
And so that video would have recorded most of the things that you saw and places that you went while you were here that evening. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Did there come a time in which you encountered a group of folks that were armed in front of the 59th Street car source location?
I did.
Can you tell us about that?
After the police had moved the demonstrators from the park, they started to form a line, which they would then advance, moving the demonstrators south down Sheridan Road. So, let's say maybe 10-15 minutes after they started clearing the park out, I found myself outside of the 59th Street car source. As I walked up, one of the first things I had noticed that there were people armed with long guns, AR-15 type weapons, similar to the defendants, and they had been on the roof. I recall like 3 of them, I think. and there were also individuals on the ground, similarly dressed, similarly armed. On the ground, I recall 4 seeing initially.
Why are you on a roof?
Do you
With the
remember
AR-15?
the first time that you observed the defendant that evening?
I do.
Can you tell us about that?
That's like premeditated.
There was an individual who I had assumed came from the demonstration. The reason I assumed that is because this person was coming from north, traveling southbound. This individual is being supported by 2 other individuals, kind of like that. If you were to hurt your leg and you needed somebody to help you. I had observed this individual come closer to the car source as the defendant had been essentially offering medical aid. And then that was the first time that I saw the defendant.
Do you know what happened with regard to that person who was being supported by other people and the defendant?
I only know what I had seen in the moment. I don't know what happened to this person afterwards, but what I observed was the defendant offering medical assistance, and then this individual being carried in a way onto the car source property. I then heard somebody yell, "Don't let them treat you." And I turned around. And I don't remember why exactly I turned around, but then moments later I then turned back facing towards the car source and towards the defendant and towards that individual. And then that individual, along with the other 2 people supporting them, were exiting the property.
Did you see the defendant provide any treatment to that individual?
I did not.
Do you remember a time when you were at that location, that car source location, and you observed a dumpster out in the middle of the road?
I do recall that, yes.
What do you remember about that?
I didn't see how it got there, but it was your pretty typical municipal dumpster, green with the black top. I didn't see anybody actively pushing it. Like I said, I didn't even see how it got there. But it was probably about a dumpster's length from the curb, which would be in front of car source.
Did you see anyone trying to start it on fire?
I did not.
Can we please bring up the live stream exhibit number 57 at the 55:44 mark, please? Go ahead.
Here. How's it going? You guys want to fuck around and find out? Do it. Fuck you. You won't do it, pussy. That's what's up. You won't do it. That's my fucking top, bitch.
Protect your property, not the street. A white guy with a gun
Antagonizing.
talking about F around and find out.
Protect the property, not the street. Protect your property, not the street. Protect your property, not the streets. 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 That's what the fuck y'all here for.
What we just observed, Mr. Grosskreutz, is that part of the live stream that you recorded that evening?
That is.
And I noticed there seems to be a little bit of a lag in the, audio to the video. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay. But is that a true and correct copy of what you recorded that night?
Apart from the 1 or 2 second delay, it is.
So this incident here with the dumpster and whatnot, were you physically there, right there, a few feet away when all this was going on?
I was.
And did you observe the people that were around you at that time?
I did.
On that particular evening, and again, I'm going to ask you to try and go back and put yourself in the mindset of that night. when you're out there on the street that evening, had you ever heard of anyone by the name of Joseph Rosenbaum?
No,
Had you ever met that person before?
never.
Do you recall seeing Joseph Rosenbaum at any point that evening?
I do not.
In particular, right around the time of this dumpster fire in front of 59th Street Car Source, do you recall seeing him around that at any point?
I do not.
Do you recall hearing anyone make any threats to any of the people at the Car Source location that if I get you alone, I'm going to kill you, or anything along those lines?
I do not.
Do you recall hearing anyone make any threats to any of those people at that Car Source location?
I do not.
I didn't hear any threats either. So.
Minus fuck around and find out.
Well, right.
You mentioned
yeah,
that the first time you saw the defendant was this
that
person
right?
that was
I don't know.
limping, being supported by other people. And I know you mentioned that eventually you saw that person walking away. Do you remember any other observations that you made of the defendant when you were at the 59th Street Car Source?
I do.
Can you tell us about that?
I took note, like I said, there were 4 people essentially in front of me that I could see, so I took note of what they were wearing, how they were armed. Like I said, they were all similarly armed with a similar weapon that the defendant used.
Y'all planned on.
Some of them, especially as you can see in the video, had body armor, chest rigs, and then I noted that the defendant was wearing a baseball cap, green shirt, jeans, and then also a rifle.
At that moment in time, did you have any idea who he was?
No,
Never met him before?
never.
Were there times in which you saw him wearing gloves on his hands?
I did.
When was that?
I recall this being right around this time. Then I noticed the defendant also wearing blue latex gloves, or maybe dark purple latex gloves that are very common in a healthcare setting.
Did that strike you as unusual?
In the moment, no, it did not.
Do you wear gloves like that when you treat people?
I do.
Tell us about the process of putting them on and taking them off.
Yeah. So these gloves that are common throughout all healthcare systems, they're nitrile, or they can be latex or non-latex. These gloves are designed to essentially stop anything wet that you don't want on your hands, so like blood or any sort of bodily fluids. The idea is what's called body substance isolation. So despite it being a very thin piece of plastic, it's very good at keeping contagions off of your hands. So the idea is, and also keeping in mind too that you want to have your hands clean when you're also touching somebody else, especially if there is any sort of open wound. You want to minimize that potential for contamination or cross-contamination. The idea is that when you come upon a patient, obviously if you're able to, wash your hands, some sort of sanitizer, something along those lines, and then prior to administering aid or treatment to a patient, and then put these gloves on. And then after treating your patient, there is a specific way to remove your gloves that, let's say if there was some sort of fluid or contagion on the gloves, there's a proper way to remove them to where you wouldn't get your hands dirty afterwards with whatever it might be on the glove.
So when you're working as an EMT or a paramedic, do you typically keep one set of gloves on your hands constantly throughout your shift?
Never.
Why not?
Essentially for the reasons that I just stated. I mean, if you treat...
Sorry, essentially what?
Essentially for the reasons that I just previously stated. If you treat one patient, and on an ambulance shift, on a 24-hour shift, 48-hour shift, one call every hour and a half.
Okay.
He said, "I'm going to the police."
Oh, wait. Okay, yeah. This is real important right here. Here.
It was there that while I was live streaming, I met or had contact with the defendant.
Can we please play Exhibit 57, the live stream, starting at the 1 hour, 17 minute, and 10 second mark?
It sounded like gunshots. It sounds like multiple gunshots. People are scattering. Now this is southbound on Sheridan. This is... I was just at 60th. Looks like they even set up a recliner. Oh, 110%, bro.
Yeah, dude.
100. Shots.
Pause there for a moment, Mr. Grosskreutz. This is the video you recorded, correct?
Correct.
And you have told us that you started running from a little bit south of 60th, that gas station, down South Sheridan. Is that right?
That is right.
Were you recording with your phone?
I was.
Were you holding your phone in your hand while you were running?
I was.
Okay. Please continue.
Why you shooting?
Hey, what are you doing? You shot somebody? Who shot? Who shot?
Can you identify that individual on the screen?
That is the defendant.
So he's
Can
running
we
with
rewind
him.
10 seconds and play that again, please?
Hey, what are you doing? You shot somebody? Who shot?
He said, I'm going to the
Can you
police.
tell us, I'm going to ask you two separate questions. First of all, going back into that moment, that interaction you just had with the defendant, what did you think at the time he said to you?
At the time, I had thought that the defendant had said, I'm working with the police. I didn't do anything.
Now that you've had a chance to review the video, do you know what he actually says?
Yes.
What is that?
After watching the video, he said, I'm going to the police.
And did he say anything else?
I didn't do anything, is what I make out from... it's hard to hear from the muffling, but that's what I make out of it.
I want you to try and put yourself back in the frame of that evening when you heard him say something to the effect of, was it, I'm working with the police? Is that right?
Correct.
What was your reaction to that?
I found it odd, and very noteworthy.
Yeah, me too. I feel you.
Previously in the night,
doesn't even look-
an individual I had recorded, Mr. Balch,
20.
had described
Look like you were working with
some sort of plan
nothing.
No.
Like,
with the police that they were going to
they stay together. They ain't
essentially
separated, running,
push
and
demonstrators south down
So
Sheridan
they just left you out
and
by
then
yourself?
past the car source
He didn't
lot,
say I'm working with
and then from
Well,
there we're going
obviously,
to
right. So the guy was like very
essentially retreat or back up that line. And Mr. Balch had explained that there was some sort of understanding, some sort of plan to whatever extent that is, but that the police were going to push protesters down past the car source. And he said that then the police told him that it was up to the militia members, as they refer to themselves, to
him that the
deal with
police
them.
were allowing them to deal with the people that had the
When
car
you
source. So
heard the
that's why I
defendant
thought the guy said, "I'm
say
sorry."
what you thought was, I'm working with the police, did that bring back that other knowledge,
Right,
what Mr.
yeah,
Balch had
see.
said?
Yes.
Can we play the video forward just a few more seconds and then I'm going to pause again?
Yeah, the police.
Who shot?
Stop him!
Hey, stop him!
It appears to me, Mr. Grosskreutz, that you ran along or jogged along the defendant for a moment when you had that little interaction. Is that fair to say?
That is.
And then it looks like you kind of let him continue and you turned back south again. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say, yes.
Why did you do that?
So, you hear me ask the question, who's shot? Who is shot? At that moment, the only thing I was concerned about was finding this person who had been shot, or presumably had been shot. Given that I was still north of where I thought the shots had come from, instinctually I turned, did a 180 facing northbound, then turned southbound, because I was concerned for whoever might be potentially injured.
It appears from the video, though, that you don't go very far before you turn and head back after the defendant. Would that be fair to say?
That is fair to say.
What changed?
I'd seen a number of people running northbound in the same direction as the defendant. I'd started hearing people saying, he just shot that guy, he just shot somebody.
So he turned around to go to the
yeah.
victim, and then turned back around.
So
and
then you
started
turn
following the
around
defendant.
and head back north after the defendant.
I wouldn't say after the defendant.
Why did you turn around and head back north after you heard these people say these things?
Yeah,
Exactly.
With what Mr. Balch had said previously, essentially the way that these self-proclaimed militia members were conducting themselves, the gunshots, people yelling for a medic, my interaction with the defendant, my interaction with the defendant, and
I guess
really the lack of
over here you-
information that I had gotten from him, and specifically what I had thought I had heard, then coupled with
I know.
this group of people
Therein lies our problem. You could at least
running northbound.
But they're more concerned with making sure
I
other
had,
people are oppressed than they are.
essentially made an
forced
inference or an
to
assumption
go
that
with them. Yeah,
there could be a
exactly.
potential for somebody getting injured.
With guns.
Right, yeah. Well, they were minors
And
with
anytime
guns,
you
too.
bring a firearm into that equation, the stakes are much higher for both serious injury and death.
Based on all the factors that you just outlined for us, did you feel like your services might, as a medic, might be more needed in the direction the defendant was headed?
Correct.
Yeah, see that I don't understand because you got a bleeding man.
What did you
down
do
over
after
here,
that?
And you think you should go over here instead? I think he just wanted
After I
to
turned
fire.
around and started running in the same direction as the defendant, again, this I wouldn't say that there was more people joining, but more people were then pointing out the defendant, saying that he had
You
just
know
shot
what?
somebody,
Let's listen to that footage.
that he's trying to get away, get him, things of that nature. And then so again, further inferencing from the things that I heard and experienced, witnessed earlier in the night, I thought that the defendant was an active shooter. And like I had mentioned earlier, anytime you add a firearm into the equation, like I said, the stakes are so much higher for somebody potentially
He was an active
being seriously
He
injured
actively shot and killed someone.
or being killed.
Can we please pull up exhibit number 5? Exhibit 5. This is the BG on the scene video. Let's go ahead and play that. I'll be pausing here in a little bit.
Now he's on the ground. You see that guy tried to jump him?
Yeah.
Then he shot.
We just saw you come running into the screen from the right. You're just behind that figure in the white shirt.
I know, but watch.
Before this moment,
Watch.
had you drawn your firearm?
Yes. Wait.
No.
Where was it?
Like I mentioned at the beginning, I keep my pistol holstered in the small of my back.
But don't you have it in your hand at this point?
Yes.
I can't see.
Okay.
Can't see from this video.
Did there come a time when you were running that you did pull your gun out?
Yes.
Why?
He's an active shooter.
Again, in the moment, I
Active
thought that
shooter.
the defendant was an active shooter.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot.
Pause right there.
Okay.
We've
This
already seen this video.
Over
There is an
here.
individual.
right here is paramedic who's testifying. This guy here is dropkick guy. Okay.
Okay.
He's the one who ran up and went to kick him. This guy over here is about to be murdered.
Hold on though.
On the left.
So this is why I'm the whole self-defense thing. Now, seconds. I'll give you that. He was running down the street. He was with him. Turn around, turn back around. I get all that. All these people watched you
I know.
murder someone.
It's still
But wait a
self-defense.
minute. If they would have taken him down, got the gun from him and everything else, he'd have been. They'd
But
have
they
all been.
didn't.
Hold on. They'd have all been heroes.
But they didn't.
But
They
that's
didn't.
that's exactly what they were trying to do. Okay, so if you're in a school,
How do you know they were trying to do that? We don't
This
know that.
is-
We don't know what they were trying to do.
girl,
First of all, this man's dead, so he can't tell us what he was trying to
absolutely,
do. Secondly, this man here is holding a Glock.
as he should be,
There's a Glock in his
as
hand,
he should be,
and this man over here just attempted to kick him.
as he should.
What I'm saying is, strictly speaking, under the law, is
In this-
self-defense. This aspect. Now, we talked about this earlier. That whole first incident, which
Is
we-
why they were chasing his ass in the first
correct,
place.
but that does not change it from self-defense in this situation. And we talked about this. There's another example. We talked about there's a woman out here who's on trial right now. Her husband was in the shower. They had a fight. She walked over to a safe,
They
a
had
gun
an
safe.
argument because when you say fight,
Okay,
it
they had an
sounds like
argument.
he put hands on
Maybe
her.
he did. We'll never know because he's dead. She walked over to the gun safe and entered the code and took out the gun. There goes your self-defense.
Right.
Self-defense has to be like immediate. This is immediate. This man has a freaking gun pointed at him.
As he should.
I agree, but that
who
doesn't. That makes it
is,
self-defense.
Had been shot at twice by the defendant.
Because if it
Then
was
the
me and you
defendant is
watched
there
him
on the
shoot
ground,
me,
and there's another individual
expect you
between
to go
the
get
defendant
him.
and you,
Oh, I'm not. No, he's not
Anthony
getting
Huber,
nowhere.
oh, that's
who
what I'm
has been
saying.
shot in the chest.
Ain't no
at this
kicking.
point.
No,
And that
right?
individual
Shot him.
to the right of Mr.
should've
Huber that's
shot
sort of crouched over, that's you,
That's
correct?
what I'm going to need.
Correct.
Yeah. No.
No.
Yeah, I agree.
no.
I agree.
Did
but
you
that's not the law.
witness the defendant fire 2 shots at that
catch
man
a
on the
case
left?
for
Absolutely.
I did.
Did you witness him fire a shot into Mr. Huber's chest?
I
Okay,
did.
yeah.
Back me up. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you come upon the defendant at this
What
point,
we not gonna
do you recall what you were holding in your hands?
Okay,
do.
listen.
What were you holding?
In my right hand, I had my Glock pistol, and in my left hand, I had my cell phone.
So this guy's running with him at.
What was going through
did
your
it.
mind
I know.
at this particular moment?
Shoot him. That's what I've been going through.
No, this kid is too soft. He's like, I couldn't even hurt a fly.
Oh, see?
That I was gonna die.
You have to keep up that life today.
Oh, all
Let's
these
continue
kids
the
think they're
video
about
for
that.
just
They
a
carry
second,
guns
please.
like they're about that life. But when it comes to push and shove.
Pause.
Okay.
There's a time in this video when you appear to hold your hands up. Do you know about that? Do you recall that?
This is
Do.
paramedic guy.
Why did
Yeah.
you do that?
After Anthony Huber was shot,
Anthony Hubert's the one that
you can
just got shot.
see it in the video. I'm not too far behind him.
Yeah.
And the defendant had, after murdering Anthony Huber,
The objection is sustained. That whether the death of Anthony Huber was caused by murder or not is for you jurors to decide and not for the witness.
Whatever.
So please keep that in mind. That people,
Huber's dead,
when they're in
right?
the court and they're testifying,
He's dead?
they can be
Okay.
affected by their
He didn't
emotions,
take his
sometimes
own
by their
life, did he?
jobs.
No, he didn't die of natural
And
causes?
they will,
Murder.
someone who comes into a physician, for example, with a gunshot
We don't
wound,
got. We don't.
may be identified
I know
as a
what you said.
victim.
They heard it now.
And
so
that's
they can't
the language
undo
that they speak in
Well,
the
and
hospital
he
because the
makes such
person comes in with a
emphasis of
gunshot
it.
wound.
Right.
Here in the court, where the
I know this judge.
in that moment, I felt that I had to do something.
Okay, wait.
Thank you. That's all I'm saying.
It's not
He
why it was
had-
out. I
Somebody had to do
inferred
something.
that the defendant wasn't.
Where the hell are the cops in all this? Can anybody
Okay,
tell
this
me?
is really graphic. It gets worse. This is actually a light shot. So this guy had his arm like this, and the kid shot, and the bullet went here, and it like tore out. This gets real graphic, folks. Cover your eyes.
This is me probably 30 seconds after I was shot by the defendant. You see who I believe to be Mr. Lukowski on the right of the screen. Me in the center with the blue paramedic hat. Right above my hat is Mr. Balch, I believe. And then to the left of me, unfortunately I don't know who the two individuals who you can't see their faces are. But then that is a person I came to know as CJ Halliburton, who was also live streaming that night. And him, myself, and Mr. Lukowski are...
So I'm like, why would he
Mr.
shoot
Halliburton
a
is
fellow
applying
paramedic
a tourniquet
with a fellow
to my
paramedic
right
had
bicep
guns?
while Mr. Lukowski and myself are trying to instruct
so-
Mr. Halliburton on
So
the
it's okay
use and application
for him to walk around with
of
his
the
gun.
tourniquet.
Oh no no
Can
no
we
no! It
please
wasn't
play
in his
exhibit
hand. The boy
60?
was walking around, and it was strapped. he had it strapped. The boy had it strapped. The EMT had it in his hand. Please,
No.
there's a distinction to be
He's
made.
Literally.
Yes, it's strapped to, but it's not in his hand. It's strapped to his chest.
No,
Misha.
he was holding it.
I know. And we're gonna pause this video, and they're gonna pause, and then we're gonna make another video. When we come back, you'll see some more.
Hey, this is fire on me. What the? Medic! Give me this. Here's your kicker. That was not me. I just saved him. Come on. Hey, look at me.
What in math? I don't practice.
Right there, we're coming out to you. We got right in front of Bearcat. We're coming out to you.
Back it up.
Well, they were pushing everyone out of the park. Yeah, I know. All right, so this is it for now. Thanks for joining us. We'll have another exciting episode of Misha Watches Gaige the Witness.
I'm not convinced, but we'll talk about it when we come back.
That's right. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.